everyone, I am Christian Ibarwala and I will be discussing superficial deposits and soil types. First, what are superficial deposits? Superficial deposits are unconsolidated geological materials formed during the Quaternary period or within the last 2.6 million years. These deposits lie above older bedrock formations. In simple terms, ito yung mga loose materials sa ibabaw ng lupa tulad ng sand, gravel, silt, at clay. Understanding superficial deposits is very important in civil engineering. Bakit? Because these materials directly affect foundation stability, drainage, and soil behavior. Kapag mali ang soil assessment, possible magkaroon ng settlement, instability, or structural failure later on. Soil is a type of superficial deposits formed through the weathering, transport, and deposition of rock particles combined with organic matter. Over time, nabubuo ito dahil sa physical at chemical processes na nagpapa-breakdown ng rocks. In engineering, soil is classified based on particle size and physical behavior into four main types, which is gravel, sand, silt, and clay. These are grouped into coarse-grained soil like gravel, medium-grained soil like sand, and fine-grained soil which include silt and clay. This classification helps engineer predict kung paano gagalaw ang lupa under loads, katulad ng buildings and roads. The coarse-grained soil, which is gravel. It belongs to this group because its particle size is greater than 2 millimeters. This means the particles are large, so it has very high permeability or mabilis ang daloy ng tubig. It also has high bearing capacity, meaning kaya nitong mag-support ng heavy loads. And low compressibility, meaning it does not compress easily under pressure. However, it has poor cohesion, or in simple terms, hindi masyadong nagdidikit ang particles. Because of these properties, gravel is used in road bases, foundation layers, drainage systems, and as an aggregate in concrete. Next is sand. Sand is a medium-grained soil with particle sizes ranging from 0.06 to 2 millimeters. Sand has moderate to high permeability, low cohesion, and low plasticity. Ano nga ba ang plasticity? Plasticity is the ability of soil to change shape without cracking. When sand is properly compacted, its strength increases. Kaya madalas itong gamitin sa concrete and mortar, as well as in embankment, pavements, backpiling, and drainage system. Silt is a fine-grained soil with particle sizes between 0.002 and 0.06 millimeters. Silt has low permeability, meaning mabagal ang movement ng tubig, and low cohesion, so the particles do not bind strongly. Kapag saturated, silt can lose strength and become unstable, which is not ideal for construction. Because of this, silt is generally used as fill materials in low-load areas. It is also important in agriculture due to its ability to retain moisture. Clay is an extremely fine-grained soil with particle sizes less than 0.002 millimeters. Clay has high plasticity, meaning madali itong mamold kapag basa, and strong cohesion, meaning the particles stick together well. It also has very low permeability, so water moves through it very slowly. However, clay is highly compressible. Ano nga ba yun? Compressibility refers to how much the soil decreases in volume under load. Clay is also moisture sensitive, meaning nag-expand and nag-shrink depende sa water content. Because of these properties, clay is used in canal linings, landfill liners, and earth dams. But foundation requires proper soil treatment. Clay and silt are also classified as organic or inorganic based on their organic content. Let's move on first to silt. Organic silt contains organic matter, making it weaker and highly compressible, kaya hindi recommended for heavy structural loads. Inorganic silt naman may appear stable when dry but loses strength when saturated. Last is clay. Organic clay contains decomposed organic matter. It has low strength and high compressibility, kaya hindi siya suitable for foundations without treatment. Inorganic clay consists mainly of minerals particles and has high plasticity, strong cohesion, and low permeability, making it suitable for canal linings and earth dams. And for the next topic, let's have Lawrence.
Okay, thank you for your wonderful presentation, Miss Roan. Now, ako nga pala si Lawrence Andres Sangalang and magre-report sa inyo about weathering. To start, we need to understand what weathering actually is. It's the process where solid bedrock is broken down into smaller pieces called superficial deposits or sediment. And meron tayong tatlong types of weathering. Next slide please. Our first type is mechanical weathering, also known as physical weathering. This is when rocks break into smaller fragments without changing their chemical composition. Imagine smashing a glass with a hammer. The pieces are smaller, but they are still made of glass. Next, we move to chemical weathering. Unlike mechanical weathering, this actually changes the ingredients of the rock. It alters the internal mineral structure. One process you've all seen is oxidation. This is when oxygen reacts with the iron in the rock to form rust. It makes the rock red and brittle. Then, we have carbonation and hydrolysis. Carbonation happens when rainwater mixes with the CO2 to form a weak acid. This acid dissolves limestone, creating caves. Recent geochemical analysis from 2025 by Wang confirmed that this creates very sharp boundaries between the soil and bedrock. Hydrolysis and when water turns hard minerals like feldspar into soft clay. This is actually crucial for our planet because, as noted by Vian et al., this process helps trap carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We also see hydration, where minerals absorb water physically as well, and solution, where minerals like salt just dissolve completely and wash away. Next slide please. Now, what happens when living things get involved? And that's what you call biological weathering. This is unique because it's a mixture of both physical and chemical processes. Physically, we have root wedging. As trees grows, the roots penetrate cracks in the rock. As the roots get thicker, they exert massive pressure that splits the rock open. Chemically, we have a process called chelation. Organisms like lichens and mosses releases organic acids that eat away at the rock surface to get nutrients. A study by Finlay in 2020 described this as biological mining, where the plants are literally dissolving the rock to feed themselves. And we can't forget bioturbation. This is when animals like worms and ants mix the soil, bringing fresh rock to the surface so the weather can get to it. Next slide, please. Finally, we have the influence of climate. It is important to note that climate is not a type of weathering. It is the master variable that controls everything else. It dictates which type of weathering happens and how fast it happens. In tropical climates, where it's hot and wet, chemical weathering dominates. The heat and water speed up the reactions, creating deep, clay-rich soils. In arid or polar climates, there is not enough liquid water for chemical reactions. So, mechanical weathering takes over like freeze-thaw cycles in the Arctic or heat stress in the desert. Recent research by Nordling in 2025 has even shown that climate variability, like extreme rainfall events due to global warming, is accelerating these weathering rates, even in places we would not expect. Essentially, the warmer and wetter the climate, the faster our rocks turn into soil. And that's it for my report. Next slide na po tayo and mapupunta naman po ito para kay Mr. Hardy.
So now, let's talk about residual soils. So basically, residual soils are soils that develop in place from the weathering of parent rock and remain at the location of their formation. So unlike transported soils, residual soils are not moved by agents such as water, wind, ice, or gravity. Their properties depend largely on climate, vegetation, parent material, topography, and time. So based on this influence of these factors, residual soils are classified into zonal soils, azonal soils, and interzonal soils. So first, we have zonal soils. Zonal soils are mature and well-developed soils formed mainly under the influence of climate and natural vegetation. These soils show well-defined soil horizons and reflect the climate conditions of the region in which they develop. Climate plays a dominant role in controlling the rate of weathering, organic matter accumulation, and leaching processes in zonal soils. So examples of zonal soils include desert soils, clay soils, chestnut soils, Chernozem soils, laterite soils, soils, brown earths, and tundra soils. Desert soils develop in arid regions with very low rainfall and high evaporation, resulting in the accumulation of salts. Chernozem soils are found in grassland regions and are highly fertile due to their high humus content. Laterite soils form in hot and humid tropical regions where intense rainfall leads to heavy leaching of minerals, leaving behind iron and aluminum oxides. Podzol develop in cold temperate climates under coniferous forests and are acidic with strong leaching, while tundra soils occur in extremely cold regions and exhibit very low soil formation. So next, azonal soils. Azonal soils are immature soils that lack well-developed horizons. These soils are mainly influenced by parent material and recent deposition or erosion processes rather than by climate or vegetation. Because of their young age, azonal soils show little profile development. So common types of azonal soils include litosols, rigosols, and alluvial soils. Litosols are thin, shallow soils found over hard rock surfaces and steep slopes. Rigosols consist mainly of loose, sandy material and are commonly found in deserts and sand dunes. Alluvial soils are formed by the deposition of sediments transported by rivers and are typically found in floodplains and river valleys. These soils are generally fertile and highly suitable for agriculture due to their rich mineral content. And lastly, intrazonal soils. Intrazonal soils are well-developed soils whose characteristics are influenced mainly by local environment factors such as parent material, drainage conditions, and topography, rather than by climate. These local factors modify the normal soil forming processes, resulting in distinctive soil properties. So major types of intrazonal soils include saline and alkaline soils, Ranzima soils, and bog or marsh soils. Saline and alkaline soils develop in arid and semi-arid regions where evaporation exceeds precipitation, causing the accumulation of salts and resulting in high soil pH. Ranzina soils form over limestone bedrock and are typically shallow, dark-colored, and rich in calcium carbonate. Bog or marsh soils occur in uh, waterlogged areas, have poor drainage, and contain high amounts of organic matter, often leading to acidic soil conditions. And for the next topic, we have Miss Denise Joy Mariano.
Transported superficial deposits refers to the loose unsolidated materials found on the Earth's surface that did not form in their present location. These materials, such as sand, silt, clay, and gravel, were originally part of rocks that were broken down through weathering and then moved by natural agents. The formation of these deposits involves three main processes: erosion, where rocks are broken into smaller particles; transportation, where these particles are carried away by wind or water; and deposition, where the materials settle and accumulated once the transporting force lose energy. There are five types of transported superficial deposits. Aeolian deposits. Aeolian deposits are sediments that are transported and deposited by wind. These deposits commonly form in dry and semi-arid regions such as deserts, beaches, and coastal areas, where there is little vegetation to hold the soil in place and where strong winds are present. Wind is capable of carrying fine particles such as sand and dust over long distances. When wind velocity decreases, the sediments it carries are deposited, forming land features like sand dunes and loess deposits. Aeolian deposits play an important role in shaping landscapes and can also influence soil properties, especially in areas where fine wind-blown sediments improve soil fertility. Alluvial deposits. Alluvial deposits are sediments that are transported by flowing water, mainly by rivers and streams. As water moves downstreams, it carries materials of various sizes. When the speed of the water slows down, these materials are gradually deposited, creating different landforms. There are several types of alluvial deposits depending on where the sediments accumulated. The first one is a floodplain. A floodplain is a wide flat area of land adjacent to a river. It forms when a river overflows during periods of heavy rainfall or flooding and deposits fine sediments onto the surrounding lands. Over time, repeated flooding builds up layers of fertile soil, making floodplains ideal for agricultural activities. However, despite their fertility, floodplains are also high-risk areas for flooding, which can pose danger to settlements. Next is levees. Levees are raised ridges of sediments found along the banks of a river. They form naturally when floodwaters overflow the river channels and deposits coarser and heavier materials close to the river banks. As flood occurs repeatedly, these deposits accumulate, gradually increasing the height of the river banks. Natural levees help confine river flows and reduce minor flooding, although they may also be reinforced or replaced by artificial levees built by humans. Next is a delta. A delta forms at the mouth of a river where it enters a body of standing water such as a sea, lake, or ocean. At this point, the river loses much of its energy, causing the sediment it carries to settle. The continuous deposition of sediments creates a triangular or fan-shaped landform, often divided into smaller channels called distributaries. Deltas are usually nutrient-rich and fertile, which is why many major civilizations and agricultural regions have developed in delta areas. The last is alluvial fan. An alluvial fan forms when a river or stream flows from a steep mountain region onto a flat plain. As the slope suddenly decreases, the water slows down and deposits sediments load. The sediments spread outward in a fan-shaped pattern with coarser materials near the source and finer materials farther away. Alluvial fans are commonly found at the base of the mountain ranges. The last three types of transported superficial deposits will be discussed by JP.
Good morning everyone, my name is John Paul Revoltar and let's continue the discussion with glacial deposits. Glacial deposits refer to the rocks, soil, and sediments that are transported and eventually left behind by glaciers. A glacier is a large mass of ice that moves very slowly due to gravity. Even though mabagal ang galaw nito, sobrang lakas ng epekto niya sa landscape. As glaciers move, they scrape, block, and grind the surface beneath them. Parang giant sand scraper ang glacier, kinakaskas niya ang lupa at bato. All the materials it picks up are carried along until the glacier melts, slows down, or stops, and that's when deposition happens. There are two major types of glacier deposits. The first one is till. Till is made up of unsorted sediments, meaning halo-halo ang sizes. May malalaking bato, gravel, sand, at clay lahat magkakasama. Walang layers, and it is deposited directly by the ice, not by water. That's why magulo ang itsura niya. The second type is stratified drift. This deposit is formed by meltwater from glaciers. Glacial deposits are very important because they help scientists reconstruct past climates. If we see glacial deposits in a certain area, it means that region was once cold enough to support glaciers. This gives us strong evidence of ice age that happens thousands of years ago. For example, in North America and parts of Europe, large glaciers once covered the land. When they retreated, they left behind features like moraines, outwash plains, and glacial valleys. Until now, these features still control the shape of the land. Glacial deposits also influence soil fertility and land use. Some areas with glacial sediments became good agricultural lands while others became rocky and difficult to develop. So hanggang ngayon, may epekto pa rin sila sa human activities. Next, let's move on to gravity-transported soil. Gravity-transported soil refers to soil and rock materials that move downhill solely due to gravity. Unlike rivers, glaciers, or wind, this process usually happens on slopes such as hillsides, mountains, and cliffs. The movement can be very slow or very fast depending on the conditions. One example is soil creep. This is the slowest form of movement. Halos hindi mo napapansin pero over time, gumagalaw pababa ang soil little by little. Makikita ito kapag ang mga poste, puno o pader ay bahagyang nakatagilid. Another example is slumping, where a mass of soil moves downward in a curved motion. This usually happens when the soil becomes saturated with water, making it heavy and unstable. The most dangerous form is landslide. Landslides occur suddenly and move very fast, often triggered by heavy rainfall, earthquakes, or volcano activity. Dito nangyayari ang maraming disasters, lalo na sa mga mabubundok na area. Gravity-transported soils are usually poorly sorted and the rocks are often angular, meaning matatalim pa ang edges because they haven't been transported far. Now, let's talk about lacustrine deposits. Lacustrine deposits are sediments that form in lakes. These sediments accumulate at the bottom, edges, or deltas of a lake. Since lake water is usually calm, the sediments settle slowly and gently. These materials take a long time to settle, kaya bagay na bagay ang still water environment ng lake. Over time, these sediments form thin layers called laminations or varves. Each layer can represent a season or a year. Example, a lighter layer might represent summer deposition, while a darker layer represents winter. Because of this, Lacustrine deposits are very valuable in studying climate history. Scientists can analyze the layers to determine past rainfall, temperature changes, and even volcanic eruptions. Parang timeline ng Earth's environment changes. Lacustrine deposits also affect soil properties around lakes. Some are rich in organic material, while others can cause poor drainage, which is important to consider for agricultural and construction. Let me give you an example. Let's say an oxbow lake. An oxbow lake forms from a meandering river. Over time, erosion happens on the outer bends of the river, while deposition occurs on the inner bends. As the bends grow closer, the river eventually cuts through, creating a shorter and straighter path. The abandoned bend becomes an oxbow lake which has a U-shaped appearance. Once separated from the main river, the water becomes still. Because the water is calm, oxbow lakes function like small lakes. This allows fine sediments such as clay and silt to settle at the bottom, forming lacustrine deposits. These deposits preserve information about past river flows, flooding events, and landscape changes. By studying them, scientists can understand how river migrates over time and how floodplains develop. Oxbow lakes are also important ecosystems, providing habitats for plants and animals. So aside from geological importance, may ecological value din sila. And that concludes my report.